There are places the military builds and then forgets about, structures that outlast the people who made them, the missions that needed them, and sometimes, the things that were left inside. Tonight, 3 people share what happened to them in those places: a forward operating base in the Kuwaiti desert, an abandoned Nike missile site in rural Ohio, and a decommissioned submarine off the coast of Puget Sound. The third story, I need you to understand something about the third story. The man who sent it to me hasn't slept a full night since it happened. Not because of what he saw. Because of what responded when he spoke. Stay with me. The patrol that came back 1 man short. I did 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan before I got out in 2019. This didn't happen in a combat zone. It happened at Fort Drum, New York, in February of 2018, during a cold weather training exercise in the Adirondack foothills. The kind of exercise where you spend 3 nights in the field and come back looking 10 years older. There were 8 of us. 2 fire teams of 4. Standard land navigation, nighttime movement through about 6 miles of forested terrain to a rally point near Black Creek. The temperature was sitting around 11 degrees. The snow was old and crusted. It made a sound like breaking glass every time you took a step. We split up around hour 2. My team went north to skirt a ridgeline. Sergeant Coletti's team continued east through a dense pine draw. The plan was to link up at a wooden shelter marker, just a post with a blue reflector, at 0230. We got there at 0218. We waited. At 0240, Coletti's team emerged from the tree line. I counted them as they came in, the way you always do, automatically, without thinking about it. 1, 2, 3. I counted again. 3. Coletti was the last one through. I asked him where Prater was. He looked at me for a moment that went on too long. Then he said Prater had been walking right next to him the entire time. We did a head count on his team. 3 soldiers. Prater was not among them. What followed was a search that lasted until first light. Every one of us walked those woods. We had the terrain mapped. We had the tracks, 6 inches of crusted snow holds a boot print like concrete. There was a clear trail from where the teams separated, all the way to the rally point. For sets of prints. Arriving. Never leaving. And then, at 0610, Prater walked out of the tree line from the south. Not the east. The south, which was behind us, which was open ground, which led back toward the road. He was fine. Physically, he was completely fine. He said he'd gotten separated in the dark and followed a drainage line until he hit the road. He said it had taken him maybe 40 minutes. The search had been running for over 3 hours. He didn't seem confused. He didn't seem scared. He answered every question the same way, in the same flat tone, like he was reading from something. I've thought about those tracks a lot. For sets going in. For sets arriving at the rally point. Coletti's team came out of those trees together. I watched them do it. I counted 3. I still don't know what I counted. Whatever came back from those trees at Fort Drum, it came back walking in a living man's boots, and that's somehow harder to sit with than something that doesn't look human at all. Nike Site Echo. I'm a land surveyor working out of Columbus, Ohio. In the fall of 2021, I was hired to assess a parcel of state land in Licking County, about 40 acres, mostly scrub and old growth, with a decommissioned Nike missile installation sitting on the western edge. Nike sites were anti-aircraft missile batteries from the 50s and 60s. Most of them were shut down by 1974. This one had been sitting untouched for nearly 50 years. I drove out on a Tuesday. October. The leaves were past peak, that dry rattling stage where they don't fall so much as scrape across everything. I had the survey equipment, a site plan from the county, and about 4 hours of daylight. The above-ground structures were mostly collapsed. The old barracks and control buildings had caved in on themselves over the decades. But the underground launcher area was accessed through a reinforced concrete stairwell set into a low mound, and the door, a heavy steel blast door, was open. Not broken open. Not rusted away. Just standing open, like someone had walked in and left it that way. I noted it and went in. The launcher room was large, maybe 60 feet across, with 3 sunken equipment bays and a lot of dead cable hanging from the ceiling like roots. My flashlight pushed maybe 30 feet of dark. The air was cold and close. Smelled like old concrete and something else I couldn't name then and still can't now. I was in there maybe 15 minutes when I heard the sound. It was rhythmic. A slow, even tapping from deep in the left bay, the one I hadn't crossed into yet. Not random. Timed. Like a metronome. I told myself pipes. I told myself thermal expansion, water drip, something settling. I crossed into the bay. The tapping stopped the moment my boot hit the concrete of that bay. Not gradually. Immediately. I stood there for a long moment. Silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat making a small sound in my ears. Then I raised my flashlight and swept the bay. On the far wall, written in something dark, in letters about 3 inches high, was a single line. It wasn't graffiti. The letters were too deliberate. Too even. It was a serial number. I recognized the format. Hadn't seen one since my 6 years in the Army, 2008 to 2014. It's the format used on DoD personnel files, the identification code assigned to individual service members. I photographed it and left. Back in my truck, I sat with the image on my phone. Something about it kept pulling at me. The leading digits. The sequence. I cross-referenced it that evening. I'm not going to say how. I know people who know how. The serial number was assigned to a soldier who had been stationed at this exact installation in 1961. He was listed as having died here. Cause of death, undetermined. Record sealed. The file had been accessed 11 days before I arrived on that property. I don't know by whom. The access log just showed a government terminal with a redacted facility code. The door had been standing open. I don't survey state land anymore. There's enough private work. The Nike site at least left something written, something that could be read, even if it couldn't be explained, but the third story offers nothing that clean. It used his voice. My name is Derek Wall. I was a sonar technician, ET rating, U.S. Navy, and in August of 2022 I was part of a small decommissioning crew assigned to the USS Kamehameha, an old ballistic missile submarine that had been mothballed at Naval Station Bremerton in Washington state. Most of the actual decommissioning had already happened years before. We were there to do final equipment documentation before the hull was scheduled for scrapping. There were 6 of us. We worked in teams of 2. I was paired with Petty Officer Marcus Finch, good sailor, steady, not the kind of person who startles easily. Our job was the forward torpedo room and the crew berthing spaces directly after it. Tight spaces. Low ceilings. The kind of compartments where every sound travels in ways that don't make sense, where a drop tool in the next compartment sounds like it happened inside your own chest. On the second day, Finch went aft to retrieve a cable reader we'd left in the berthing space. I stayed in the torpedo room, logging equipment tags. He was gone maybe 4 minutes. Then I heard him call my name. His voice, from the berthing compartment. Wal. Hey, Wal, come back here. I set down the clipboard and went back. The berthing space was empty. Old fold-down racks, still in place. Dim emergency lighting. No Finch. I called out. Nothing. I assumed he'd moved further aft and went back to the torpedo room. Finch was standing there with the cable reader, holding a coffee thermos out to me. He'd come up from below through the lower hatch, from the machinery spaces, where he'd apparently gone to check a secondary line we'd discussed that morning. He had not been in the berthing compartment. He had not called my name. He'd been 2 decks below me. I told him what I'd heard. He listened carefully. He didn't tell me I'd imagined it. He just said, "What did it sound like?" I told him it sounded exactly like him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said that 2 nights ago, when he was the last one off the boat and was doing a final walkthrough, he'd heard his own voice in the con. Coming from the periscope station. Just his name. His own name. In his own voice. We finished the documentation. We didn't talk about it with the others. 3 weeks after we left Bremerton, I got a call from one of the other guys on the crew. He'd looked into the Kamehameha's service history, which is something I hadn't done, because I'd learned not to do that kind of thing. He told me a crew member had died aboard during a 1988 patrol. An accident in the forward berthing compartment. Asphyxiation. The sailor's last name was Wal. Not a common name. My name. I've thought about what that means for a long time now. Whether it was calling to me specifically. Whether it had been waiting for someone with that name to come back aboard. Or whether what frightens me most is the other possibility, that it wasn't calling to me at all. That it was just practicing. 3 people. 3 places the military built, used, and left behind. What stayed in those places after everyone was gone, that part one can't answer for you. I do want to ask you something, if you've served, or if you've ever worked in a space that used to belong to something larger than yourself. Have you ever heard your own name somewhere it couldn't have come from? Not a misheard sound. Your name. In a voice you recognized. Leave it in the comments. I read every one. New stories arrive here every day. Subscribe if you want them. And if something in tonight's stories felt too specific to be coincidence, you're probably not wrong to feel that way.